On the broken moon of Velis 7, where the sky burned with the memory of war and the ground trembled from distant explosions, Lyra Vey walked alone. Her steps were slow, uneven, and each one sent sharp pain up her spine. She had once moved like starlight, graceful, silent, unstoppable. Now she dragged herself through the ruins of what used to be her home, her sanctuary, her command post. The citadel of the celestial host lay in shattered pieces around her. Its silver towers toppled, its glowing runes darkened by ash and blood. Lyra was an elf, tall and slender, with skin like pale moonstone and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her long silver hair, once braided with honor cords from 100 battles, now hung loose and tangled. But what marked her most were her limbs, her left arm and right leg, crafted not of flesh and bone but of gleaming biomechanical alloy. They had saved her life after the siege of Xyrus, when shrapnel from a Dominion plasma mine had torn her apart. The Archon himself had ordered the finest star metal forged into replacements, woven with living circuits and ancient elven code. For years they served her well, but now they were failing. Her left hand twitched without warning, fingers snapping open and shut like a broken puppet. Sparks hissed from the joint at her elbow. Her right leg locked mid-stride, forcing her to catch herself against a crumbling wall. She gritted her teeth, refusing to cry out. Pain was familiar. Weakness was not Kale. Her storm dragon circled above in the bruised twilight sky. His scales shimmered like liquid amethyst, catching the last rays of the dying sun. He was smaller than the war dragons of old, barely the size of a ground transport, but his wings crackled with stored lightning, and his loyalty was absolute. He had been with her since she was a young scout, long before the war turned cruel, long before her people began to doubt her. A low growl rumbled from Kale as he landed beside her, folding his wings with a soft whoosh. He nudged her shoulder gently with his snout, his golden eyes filled with worry. Lyra reached up with her working hand and stroked the ridge above his eye. "I'm still standing," she whispered, though her voice cracked. But she wasn't sure how much longer that would last. The war against the Dominion had stretched across 3 star systems and lasted longer than most human civilizations. The Dominion was not an empire of flesh but of thought, a hive mind that consumed free will and turned living beings into silent drones. The elves of Velis had resisted for centuries, their magic and technology blending in ways no other species could replicate. But cracks had formed in their unity. Some believed peace was possible. Others whispered that the Archon had grown too soft. And then came the betrayal. Lyra had been framed, false evidence placed in her quarters, a secret transmission she never sent. Her own council turned on her, stripping her of rank, exiling her to the outer ruins. They called her a traitor. Only Kale never doubted her. Now, with her limbs failing and her name erased from the rolls of honor, she had one last hope. A rumor, a whisper passed between smugglers and scavengers in the neutral zones. A human engineer at Outpost Theta who could fix anything, even things not meant for human hands. Humans. The elves had long considered them primitive. Short-lived, fragile, loud, they built clumsy ships, spoke in blunt tongues, and died before they could master even basic astral navigation. Yet in the last decade they had surprised everyone. Their machines learned. Their soldiers fought with terrifying heart. And their engineers. Some said they spoke to metal like it was alive. Lyra had scoffed at such tales once. Now she clung to them like a lifeline. She activated the small comm unit embedded in her wrist. The screen flickered, then died. She cursed under her breath and tapped it sharply. It sputtered back to life, showing a weak signal. She opened a secure channel, one she hadn't used in months, and sent a coded message. Not to her people. Not to allies. To a name she'd memorized from a smuggler's data slate. Mara Lynn, Outpost Theta. The message was simple. "I am broken. Can you mend me?" She didn't expect a reply. Humans rarely answered elven calls. But as she powered down the unit, Kyle let out a sharp chirr and pointed his snout toward the eastern ridge. A ship, small, boxy, unmistakably human, was descending through the ion storms, its engines whining against the thin atmosphere. Lyra's heart pounded. This was either salvation or a trap. She straightened her posture, ignoring the pain flaring in her leg. She would not meet this human on her knees. Even if her body betrayed her, her pride would not. The ship landed 100 meters away, kicking up dust and ash. The ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. A figure stepped out, shorter than Lyra, wrapped in a patched flight suit, goggles pushed up on her forehead. She carried no weapon, only a tool belt clinking with wrenches and data probes. Their eyes met across the wasteland. The human, Mara, didn't bow. She didn't flinch. She just looked at Lyra like she was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Lyra took a step forward. Her leg gave out. She fell hard onto one knee, sparks flying from her hip joint. Kale snarled and moved to shield her. Wings flared, teeth bared. But Mara didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, she walked forward slowly, hands open at her sides. "Easy," she said, her voice calm. "I'm not here to fight." Lyra glared up at her, pride warring with desperation. "Then why are you here?" Mara stopped a few feet away. "Because you asked." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind howling through broken stone and the low hum of Kale's charged scales. Lyra studied the human. She was young, so young by elven standards. Her face was smudged with grease, her dark hair tied back in a messy knot. But her eyes were sharp, steady. They held no fear, only curiosity. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Lyra said quietly. "My limbs, they're not just broken. They're cursed." Mara tilted her head. "Everything's fixable if you understand how it works. Even curses." Lyra almost laughed. Almost. But the pain in her arm flared again, a white-hot lance up her nerves. She gasped and clutched it to her chest. Mara didn't hesitate. She knelt beside her, not too close, but close enough to see the damage. Her fingers hovered near the sparking joint, not touching, just observing. "This isn't standard Dominion tech," Mara murmured. "This is older. Way older, and it's fighting itself." Lyra blinked. No elven technician had ever said that. They'd all assumed the limbs were simply worn out. "How do you know that?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Mara met her gaze. "Because I've seen machines like this before, not many, but enough to know they're alive in their own way. And right now yours is screaming." Kale let out a low rumble, but it wasn't a threat. It was agreement. Lyra felt something shift inside her, not in her limbs, but in her chest. Hope, fragile and dangerous, began to bloom. She had come here expecting pity or rejection. Instead, this human saw her pain not as weakness, but as a problem to be solved. Not as a fallen warrior, but as someone worth saving. "I can't stay here," Lyra said. "The Dominion patrols sweep this sector every 6 hours. If they find me..." "I know," Mara said, standing. "That's why we're leaving now." She turned and whistled sharply. The human ship's ramp lowered further, and a small maintenance drone rolled out carrying a med kit and a portable power stabilizer. "Can you walk?" Mara asked. Lyra pushed herself up with Kale's help. Her leg groaned in protest but held. "Barely." "Good enough," Mara said. "Kale can ride in the cargo bay." "There's room," Lyra hesitated. Trusting a human was one thing. Boarding her ship was another. But her limbs were failing faster than she'd admitted. She wouldn't last another night on Vela 7. She nodded. As they moved toward the ship, Kale stayed close, his body shielding Lyra from the wind and any hidden threats. Mara walked ahead, scanning the horizon with a handheld sensor. "You're not like the other humans I've met," Lyra said as they climbed the ramp. Mara glanced back. "And you're not like the elves in the war logs. They said you were ruthless, cold." "I was," Lyra admitted. "Until I learned that even stars can fall." Mara smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time someone helped you rise again." The ship's doors sealed behind them. Engines hummed to life. As they lifted off, Lyra looked down at the ruins of her home one last time. She didn't know if she'd ever return. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. Somewhere in the void between stars, a human engineer and a broken elf woman began a journey neither had planned, but both desperately needed. And high above, Kale curled his wings around them both as if to say, "We are not done yet." The ship shuddered as it broke through the upper atmosphere of Vela 7, leaving behind the red-orange glow of firestorms and the silent graves of fallen warriors. Inside the cramped cockpit, Lyra sat strapped into a co-pilot seat that was clearly built for someone much smaller. Her artificial leg rested awkwardly against the floor panel, still sparking faintly with every pulse of the ship's engines. Kale lay curled in the cargo hold behind them, his tail twitching in uneasy sleep, his scales dimmed from exhaustion. Mara Lynn kept her eyes on the navigation screen, fingers dancing over the controls with quiet confidence. She didn't speak much, but her presence was steady, like the hum of a well-tuned engine. Lyra watched her from the corner of her eye, trying to understand how someone so young, so human, could move through chaos with such calm. After a long silence, Mara finally spoke. "Outpost Theta is 3 jumps away. We'll be safe there." Lyra nodded but said nothing. Safe was a word she hadn't used in a long time. The journey took most of the night. Stars stretched into thin lines outside the viewport as the ship slipped into faster-than-light travel. Lyra dozed fitfully, her dreams filled with broken circuits and whispering voices from her own limbs. Each time she woke, Mara was still there, adjusting dials, checking readouts, or sipping from a dented metal cup. When they finally dropped out of warp near the neutral belt, the outpost came into view, a cluster of rusted modules bolted together like a child's toy, floating in the quiet dark between 2 dead asteroids. Solar panels glinted in the distance, and a single beacon blinked a slow, steady rhythm. All clear. All clear. All clear. Mara guided the ship into Docking Bay 4, the smallest and least monitored. As the clamps locked into place and the air hissed through the seals, she turned to Lyra. "We're here." Lyra unstrapped herself slowly, testing her leg before standing. It held, but barely. She limped toward the ramp, Kale rising behind her with a soft chuff of relief. The air inside the outpost smelled of oil, ozone, and old coffee. Dim lights flickered along the corridor walls. The place was quiet, too quiet. Most of the human staff had been evacuated weeks ago after a near miss with a Dominion scout. Only a skeleton crew remained, and even they stayed in the far sectors. Mara led Lyra through twisting hallways to a workshop tucked behind the main reactor room. It was cluttered but organized. Tools hung in neat rows, half-built drones sat on workbenches, and schematics covered every wall. In the center stood a medical repair chair, modified with extra ports and neural couplers. "This is where I fix things that shouldn't work," Mara said, gesturing to the chair. "Sit." Lyra hesitated. The chair looked fragile, human-made, but her limbs were burning now, the pain sharp and constant. She lowered herself into it, wincing as the sensors made contact with her skin. Mara pulled on a pair of thin gloves and activated a holographic display above the workbench. "I need to run a full diagnostic. It might hurt." "Pain is familiar," Lyra said. Mara gave her a small nod and began. She started with the left arm. Carefully, she removed the outer casing, revealing a web of glowing filaments and microgears humming with faint blue light. But something was wrong. The light pulsed erratically like a heartbeat skipping. Mara frowned. "This isn't wear and tear," she murmured. "This is sabotage." Lyra stiffened. "What do you mean?" Mara pointed to a tiny node near the shoulder joint. "See this pattern? It's repeating. Too perfect. Natural decay is messy. This is code. Someone planted a loop in your system. A slow burn designed to fry your neural link over time." Lyra's breath caught. She remembered the night before her exile. A technician she'd trusted had offered to optimize her limbs. She'd accepted, thinking it was routine maintenance. Now she knew better. "Can you stop it?" she asked, voice tight. Mara didn't answer right away. She ran a scanner over the exposed circuitry, her brow furrowed. "Maybe, but it's tied deep into your motor cortex. If I pull it out wrong, you could lose feeling in the limb, or worse, suffer a seizure." Lyra closed her eyes. "Do it." Mara worked for hours. She replaced damaged conduits, rerouted power flows, and injected a stabilizing gel that glowed faint green as it spread through the artificial veins of the limb. Kale watched from the corner, tail coiled tight, eyes never leaving Mara's hands. At one point, Lyra cried out as a jolt of feedback shot up her spine. Mara paused, hand hovering. "You okay?" Lyra nodded through gritted teeth. "Keep going." Finally, as the first gray light of artificial dawn filtered through the outpost's viewports, Mara stepped back. "The arm is stable. For now." She moved to the right leg next. This one was worse. The knee joint was fused in place, the internal gyros fried. Mara had to use a laser cutter to open the casing, and even then the damage was severe. "This leg's been overloaded," she said, "like you forced it to run when it was already broken." "I had no choice," Lyra said quietly. "I was being hunted." Mara didn't respond. She just worked harder. As she dug deeper, she found something strange. A small crystal embedded near the hip actuator. It wasn't part of the original design. It pulsed with a soft golden light, almost like a heartbeat. "What is that?" Lyra asked, leaning forward. I don't know, Mara admitted. But it's not Dominion. It's older, maybe Elven. Lyra's eyes widened. The Archon, she whispered. He gave me these limbs himself. He said they held a gift. Mara carefully extracted the crystal using a magnetic tweezer. It floated in the air between them, humming softly. This isn't just a power source, Mara said, studying it on her scanner. It's a key, and it's linked to something big. Before she could say more, an alarm blared through the outpost. Red lights flashed. A voice crackled over the intercom. Unidentified vessel approaching Docking Bay 4. Repeat, unidentified vessel. All personnel prepare for possible breach. Mara's face went pale. That's not ours. Lyra tried to stand, but her leg gave out again. Dominion? Maybe, Mara said, already moving. She grabbed a handheld pulse rifle from under the workbench and tossed a smaller one to Lyra. Can you shoot? Lyra caught it with her good hand. Better than most humans, Mara almost smiled. Good. She activated a wall panel, sealing the workshop with a heavy blast door. Then she pulled up a security feed on a nearby screen. A sleek black scout ship, Dominion design, hovered outside the bay, its docking clamps extending. They found me, Lyra said, voice hollow. Not yet, Mara said. They're scanning. They don't know you're here. Kyle let out a low growl, his scales beginning to shimmer with stored energy. Mara turned to Lyra. I need 10 minutes. Just 10. If I can sync this crystal to the outpost's mainframe, I might be able to mask your biosignature. Lyra nodded. Buy you time. She dragged herself to the door, rifle in hand. Her body screamed in protest, but her mind was clear. She had fought in worse places with less hope. Outside, the corridor was empty. She took position behind a support pillar, watching the bay doors. The Dominion ship hissed as it locked in. A ramp lowered. 3 figures stepped out, tall, armored, faceless drones, not soldiers. Mindless puppets of the hive. Lyra took a breath and fired. The first shot hit the lead drone in the chest, sending it stumbling back. The others turned instantly, their movements too fast, too smooth. They raised their weapons, pulse casters that hummed with deadly charge. Lyra ducked as blue bolts seared the air above her. She rolled behind another pillar, her artificial leg dragging. Pain shot through her, but she ignored it. She fired again, hitting the second drone's knee joint. It collapsed, twitching. But the third drone was already moving toward her, silent and relentless. Inside the workshop, Mara worked frantically. She had wired the crystal into a jury-rigged interface, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. Kyle stood beside her, wings half spread, ready to defend. Come on, Mara muttered. The crystal glowed brighter, pulsing in time with the outpost's systems. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The alarm stopped. The security feed went dark. Mara held her breath. Outside, the remaining drone froze mid-step. Its head tilted as if confused. Then it turned and walked back toward its ship, dragging its fallen companion. Lyra watched, stunned, as the ramp retracted and the scout ship lifted off, vanishing into the void. She limped back to the workshop, rifle still in hand. Mara opened the blast door before she even reached it. It worked, Mara said, exhausted but triumphant. The crystal. It sent out a signal that confused their hive link. They think this sector is empty. Lyra leaned against the doorway, breathing hard. You saved us, Mara shook her head. We saved each other. She held up the crystal. This isn't just a gift, Lyra, it's a weapon. And the Dominion wants it. Or they want you dead before you can use it. Lyra looked at the glowing shard, then at Kale, then at Mara. For the first time, she didn't feel like a broken exile. She felt like a warrior again. Then we finish what the Archon started, she said. Mara nodded. But not here, not now. We need to understand what this thing really does. She walked to a wall locker and pulled out a small data chip. I've been collecting Dominion signal patterns for months. If this crystal can disrupt their network, we might be able to turn their own army against them. Lyra's eyes lit up. A counter-virus. Exactly, Mara said. But I can't build it alone. I need your neural patterns, your memories, your connection to the limbs. Lyra didn't hesitate. Take what you need. Mara plugged the chip into the main console. This will hurt. The workshop hummed with energy as the neural sync began. Wires snaked from the console to pads on Lyra's temples and spine. Her artificial limbs glowed faintly. responding to the signal from the crystal Mara had placed in the center of the workbench. Kale lay coiled nearby, eyes half closed but alert, his body a silent promise of protection. Mara watched the data stream scroll across her screen. It was unlike anything she'd seen before. Elven code woven with organic pulses, memory fragments, and something deeper. Older. It felt alive. "This is going to be rough," Mara warned, her fingers hovering over the activation key. Lyra nodded, jaw set. "Do it!" Mara pressed the button at once. Lyra gasped. Her back arched as raw data flooded her nervous system. Images flashed behind her eyes. The Archon's face, the night he gave her the limbs, the hidden chamber beneath the citadel where the crystal was first awakened. She saw the moment the sabotage was planted, the traitor's gloved hands working in shadow, and beneath it all a single command buried like a seed. "When the time comes, awaken the storm." Her limbs burned. Not with pain, but with purpose. Mara monitored the readings, heart pounding. "Your brain is syncing with the crystal. It's reading your intent." Lyra's voice was strained. "It knows what it must do." Outside, the outpost remained quiet, but the calm wouldn't last. Dominion scouts always returned. For hours, Mara worked, cross-referencing Lyra's neural patterns with intercepted Dominion signals. She discovered something terrifying. The virus inside Lyra's limbs wasn't just meant to kill her. It was a homing beacon. Every glitch, every spark sent a faint pulse into deep space. The Dominion hadn't found her by chance. They'd been tracking her all along. "They're using your body to find the crystal," Mara said, turning to Lyra with wide eyes. Lyra's silver gaze hardened. "Then we turn their own trick against them." Mara nodded slowly. "We can't just remove the virus. It's too deep, but what if we change it? Rewrite its purpose. Instead of calling the Dominion, it could carry a countersignal, a command to break their hive mind link." Lyra understood at once. A weapon hidden inside their own trap. "Exactly," Mara said. "But to do it, I need to merge human tech with your elven systems. It's never been done before." "It has to be done," Lyra said. Mara took a deep breath. She unplugged the standard interface and began rewiring her own neural rig. A prototype she'd built from salvaged parts and stubborn hope. It wasn't elegant, but it was adaptable. Human tech learned. That was its strength. She connected the rig to Lyra's arm port. "This will hurt more than before. The system will fight back." "I've survived worse," Lyra said. Mara activated the merge. Fire raced through Lyra's veins. Her vision blurred. She saw flashes of human cities, crowded and loud, full of laughter and chaos, so different from the quiet order of elven spires. She felt Mara's memories too, the loss of her brother in an early Dominion raid the day she built her first drone, the loneliness of being the only engineer left on Theta. Their minds brushed against each other, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as allies. Kale growled softly, sensing her distress but didn't move. He trusted Mara now. On the screen, lines of code twisted and fused. Elven runes wrapped around human algorithms. The crystal pulsed brighter, its golden light spreading through the wires like liquid sun. Then, without warning, alarms blared again. Mara cursed and pulled up the security feed. 3 Dominion ships, larger this time, dropped out of warp just beyond the asteroid belt. They weren't scouting. They were attacking. "They know we're here," Mara said, voice tight. "They must have picked up the energy surge from the sink." Lyra tried to stand, but her leg locked again. "How long until the counter-virus is ready?" "Not long," Mara said, typing furiously. "But I need 5 more minutes. Maybe 10. "We don't have 10, Lyra said. Kale rose to his feet, scales flaring with stored lightning. He let out a low, rumbling cry, the call of a storm dragon preparing for battle. Mara looked at him, then at Lyra. "He's going out there, isn't he?" Lyra nodded. "He'll draw them away." Mara hesitated, then grabbed a small device from her belt. "Take this. It's a signal booster. If Kale gets close enough to their comms array, it might buy us extra time." Lyra clipped it to Kale's harness. The dragon nuzzled her hand once, then leapt toward the hangar bay, wings snapping open as he shot into the void. On the screen, Mara watched as Kyle streaked toward the lead Dominion ship, a streak of violet against the black. The enemy turned, weapons charging. "He's fast," Mara whispered. Lyra watched too, her heart in her throat. "He's more than fast. He's clever." As if on cue, Kale banked sharply. leading the ships into the debris field near the asteroids. He fired bolts of lightning from his wings, not to destroy but to blind their sensors. One ship collided with a floating chunk of metal. Another fired wildly, missing by miles. But the third ship stayed focused. It launched a swarm of hunter drones, small, fast, deadly. Inside the workshop, the counter-virus was almost ready. Lines of code stabilized. The crystal glowed steadily now, no longer fighting but cooperating. Almost there, Mara muttered. Then the lights flickered. A deep thud shook the outpost. They've boarded, Lyra said. Mara's eyes darted to the door. They must have sent a stealth team during the distraction. Lyra gripped the edge of the chair. I can't fight like this. You don't have to, Mara said, pulling a small panel from the floor. There's a maintenance tunnel under the workshop. It leads to the reactor core. If we can hold them off long enough, I can trigger a core pulse. It'll fry all electronics in the sector, including their suits. And ours, Lyra said. For a few minutes, yes. But it'll give us time to finish the upload. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Heavy, mechanical. Mara helped Lyra into the tunnel, then sealed the hatch behind them. The space was narrow, hot, filled with the thrum of the reactor below. They crawled forward, Lyra gritting her teeth against the pain in her leg. Above them, the blast door groaned as Dominion troops tried to force it open. They're using plasma cutters, Mara whispered. We've got maybe 2 minutes. At the reactor control node, Mara jacked in a portable terminal. Her fingers flew over the keys. I need you to stay connected to the crystal. Your biorhythm is the key to the final sequence. Lyra sat against the warm metal wall, closing her eyes. She focused on the hum of the crystal, on the memory of the Archon's voice, on the bond she now shared with Mara. She let her will flow into the system. Above, the door gave way with a screech of tearing metal. Boots clanged on the floor. Voices, cold, flat, emotionless, filled the workshop. Target located, one said. Mara didn't look up. 30 seconds. Lyra's limbs began to glow brighter, blue light spreading from her joints. The crystal floated in the air between them, pulsing like a heartbeat. The Dominion troops entered the tunnel. Mara hit the final key. A deep hum filled the outpost. The lights died. Every screen went black. The Dominion suits sparked and shut down. The troops collapsed, their hive link severed. Silence. Then slowly the emergency lights flickered on. Mara checked the terminal. It worked. The counter-virus is embedded in the crystal, and it's broadcasting. Lyra opened her eyes. Her limbs were steady, strong, the pain was gone. What now, she asked. Mara smiled faintly. Now we wait for the storm. On the security feed, they saw Kale returning, wings tattered but proud. The Dominion ships were drifting, their drones floating aimlessly, free from the hive mind for the first time. But Lyra knew this was only the beginning. The main Dominion fleet was still out there, and they would come in force once they realized what had happened. Mara stood and offered her a hand. We can't stay here, Lyra took it. Where do we go? Mara looked at the stars through a nearby viewport. Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere human and elven paths cross. Lyra nodded. Then we go together. Cal landed softly in the hangar, letting out a tired chirr. He limped slightly, but his eyes shone with victory. As they boarded Mara's ship once more, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not just for herself, but for both their peoples. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, they had a real weapon. Not just of metal and code, but of trust. And that, Lyra knew, was the most powerful force in the galaxy. The ship drifted in the shadow of a dead gas giant, its engines cold, its hull scarred from near misses. Inside, silence hung thick, broken only by the soft hum of life support and the steady breathing of 2 women who had pushed themselves beyond limits. Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor of the cargo bay, eyes closed, hands resting on her knees. Her artificial limbs glowed faintly, not with pain now, but with a quiet, steady energy. The crystal, now embedded in her chest port, pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Mara leaned against the cockpit doorway, arms crossed, watching her. She hadn't slept in over 30 hours. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her mind raced with plans, calculations, fears. The counter-virus was active, yes, but it was only a whisper in the void. To truly break the Dominion, they needed to amplify it, and there was only one place powerful enough to do that: The old relay station at the edge of the Veil Nebula, a forgotten human-elf joint project from the early days of the war. Lyra opened her eyes. "You're thinking too loud." Mara gave a tired smile. "Can't help it. My brain doesn't know how to shut off." Lyra stood, testing her balance. Her leg held firm, her arm flexed smoothly. "The crystal is stable. It listens now." "It's not just listening," Mara said, stepping closer. "It's learning. From you. From me. From Kale, even." As if on cue, the storm dragon lifted his head from where he lay, coiled near the rear hatch. His scales shimmered with soft violet light, still charged from the last battle. He let out a low rumble, not of warning but of readiness. Mara walked to the navigation console and pulled up a star map. A red dot blinked near the nebula's heart. "The relay station is there, built before the war turned ugly. Humans and elves worked side by side on it. It was meant to be a bridge, not a weapon." Lyra studied the map. "I remember it. The Archon spoke of it once. He said it held the key to unity." "Maybe it still does," Mara said. "The station has a quantum amplifier, strong enough to send our signal across 3 sectors. If we can reach it, we can wake every drone the Dominion ever enslaved." Lyra's expression darkened. "But the Dominion knows its value. They'll have it locked down." "Not if we're smarter than they are," Mara replied. They spent the next hours preparing. Mara rerouted power to the ship's stealth systems, patching leaks with resin and hope. Lyra meditated, syncing her mind with the crystal, learning its rhythms. Kale preened his wings, sharpening every scale for the fight ahead. When they were ready, Mara fired up the engines. The ship shuddered to life and slipped into the currents of the Veil Nebula, its ion trail hidden by the swirling clouds of ionized gas. The journey took 2 days. Time stretched thin, filled with quiet talks and shared rations. Lyra learned about Earth, its oceans, its music, its stubborn hope. Mara heard stories of elven sky cities and star-sung lullabies. They were different, yes, but not so far apart as they once believed. Then, on the 3rd morning, the station appeared. It hung in the void like a silver flower, its petals made of solar arrays and communication dishes, but it was surrounded. A Dominion dreadnought loomed nearby, its black hull bristling with weapons. Smaller patrol craft circled like vultures. Mara's hands tightened on the controls. "They're waiting for us." Lyra stood beside her. "Then we give them a show." Mara activated the comms. "Kale, you know what to do." The dragon let out a sharp cry and launched from the cargo bay before the ramp fully opened. He streaked toward the station, a blur of violet lightning. The Dominion ships turned instantly, weapons tracking. "He's fast," Mara said, "but they'll overwhelm him." "He doesn't need to win," Lyra said. "He just needs to distract them." As Kale danced through enemy fire, Mara steered the ship into the station's maintenance shadow, a blind spot in the Dominion's sensors. They docked silently on the far side, hidden behind a collapsed antenna array. Inside the station, the air was stale but breathable. Gravity plating still worked, though flickered in places. The walls bore faded murals, humans and elves building together, hands clasped across species lines. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered. "It's ours," Mara said. They moved quickly through empty corridors, following Mara's memory of old schematics. The control core was deep in the station's heart, past layers of security that had long since powered down. But as they neared the final chamber, alarms blared. Dominion troops flooded the hallway ahead. Dozens of them, faceless, relentless. Mara cursed. They must have left a garrison inside. Lyra stepped forward, her limbs glowing brighter. "Stay behind me." She raised her hands. The crystal in her chest flared. A pulse of golden light shot down the corridor. The Dominion drones froze, their movements stuttering. Some dropped to their knees. Others turned on each other, confused. "The virus is working," Mara said in awe. "But not enough," Lyra replied. "They're fighting it." More troops poured in from side passages. Kale's distraction was ending. Mara grabbed Lyra's arm. We need to reach the amplifier. Now. They ran, dodging fire, weaving through chaos. Lyra used short bursts of the crystal's energy to disrupt enemy links, buying seconds at a time. Mara hacked door controls with a handheld decoder, her fingers flying. Finally, they reached the core chamber, a vast dome filled with humming machinery and a central pillar that rose to the ceiling. The quantum amplifier. Mara rushed to the main console. I can hook the crystal into the system, but it'll take time to sync. Lyra nodded. I'll hold them. She turned to face the entrance as Dominion soldiers stormed in. This time, they didn't hesitate. They opened fire. Blue bolts seared the air. Lyra dodged, rolled, used her artificial limbs to deflect shots. Sparks flew, pain flared, but she didn't stop. She was no longer just a warrior. She was a shield. Behind her, Mara worked frantically. She jacked the crystal into the amplifier's primary node. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, elven runes merging with human protocols. The station groaned as power surged through its veins. Kale crashed through a skylight above, wings torn, one eye swollen shut. He landed between Lyra and the enemy, roaring with all the fury of a storm-given form. Lightning arced from his body, frying the nearest drones. Hurry, Mara, Lyra gasped, bleeding from a gash on her temple. I'm almost there, Mara said, sweat dripping down her face. Just a few more seconds. The Dominion pressed harder. Their hive mind was adapting, resisting the virus. The drones moved in perfect sync again, surrounding them. Lyra knew they couldn't win in a fight, but they didn't need to. She turned to Mara. Do it now. Mara slammed her palm on the final command. The amplifier roared to life. A wave of golden light exploded from the station, silent but immense. It rolled outward through space, touching every Dominion ship, every drone, every enslaved mind in the sector. On the bridge of the dreadnought, the hive commander screamed as its control shattered. In the corridors, the drones collapsed, their eyes clearing for the first time in years. Kyle let out a triumphant cry. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted but smiling. Mara pulled her up. We did it. But the victory was short-lived. The dreadnought, though crippled, still had weapons. It turned its main cannon toward the station. We have to go, Mara said, dragging Lyra toward the exit. Kale limped beside them, too tired to fly. They barely made it back to the ship. As they lifted off, the dreadnought fired. The station exploded in a silent bloom of fire and light. Mara didn't look back. She pushed the engines to full. Hours later, in the quiet dark between stars, they finally stopped. The ship floated, battered but alive. Kyle slept in the cargo hold, wrapped in a thermal blanket Mara had found. Lyra sat by the viewport watching the stars. Mara joined her, holding 2 cups of rehydrated tea. We broke them, she said softly. For now, Lyra replied. But the Dominion is vast. This was only one sector. Mara nodded. Then we keep going, one station at a time. Lyra looked at her, really looked at her. This human, so small, so fierce, had done what no elven council ever could. She had turned despair into a weapon of hope. You're not just an engineer, Lyra said. You're a leader. Mara laughed quietly. I just fix things. You fixed me, Lyra said. And in doing so, you reminded my people what we forgot, that courage isn't about age or origin. It's about choice. Mara sipped her tea, eyes on the stars. Then let's make more choices together. Far away, across the galaxy, freed drones turned their weapons on their former masters. Whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. The war wasn't over, but for the first time it had a chance. And in that tiny ship, drifting through the endless night, 2 women and a dragon prepared to light the next fire. The war did not end with a single explosion or a grand speech. It ended in quiet moments, in choices made far from the eyes of history. Weeks after the fall of the relay station, whispers spread across the sectors, Dominion ships turning on each other, drone colonies rising up, hive links fracturing like old glass. The counter-virus born from elven will and human ingenuity had taken root. It grew not through force, but through freedom. Lyra stood on the observation deck of the newly reclaimed sky citadel of Valus, her silver hair braided once more with cords of honor, not for war, but for peace. Below her, the city stirred to life after years of silence. Gardens bloomed where rubble once lay. Children played near fountains that sang with clean water. And among the elves walked humans, engineers, medics, teachers, no longer seen as fragile or strange, but as partners. Kyle rested on a sun-warmed ledge nearby, his scales gleaming with health, his wings folded like velvet cloaks. He watched the sky, not for enemies, but for friends. Mara joined Lyra at the railing, her tool belt replaced with a simple tunic, though she still wore her goggles around her neck like a charm. She carried a data slate, but it held schematics for schools now, not weapons. "They're calling you back to the High Council," Mara said, handing her a message chip. Lyra took it but didn't read it. "Let them wait," Mara smiled. "You're still not fond of politics." "Politics broke my people," Lyra said. "Hope is what rebuilt them." She turned to Mara. "You could stay, you know. The Citadel has named you an honored builder. You'd have your own workshop, your own team." Mara looked out over the city, her eyes soft. "This place is beautiful, but my home is out there." She pointed to the stars. "There are still stations to fix, colonies to protect, people who don't know the war is changing." Lyra nodded. She understood. Mara was not meant to sit in towers. She was meant to move, to build, to heal. Kyle chirped softly and nudged Mara's hand with his snout. She scratched behind his ear and he rumbled in contentment. "I heard the Dominion's central hive is retreating beyond the outer rim," Lyra said. "They're fractured, leaderless. Some say they'll vanish into the void." "Or they'll regroup," Mara replied. "We can't be careless." "No," Lyra agreed. "We stay ready." A silence settled between them, comfortable and deep. They had fought side by side, bled together, trusted when trust seemed foolish. They were not the same as they had been on that broken moon. Lyra no longer saw humans as fleeting sparks. Mara no longer saw elves as distant gods. They were simply people, flawed, brave, trying to do what was right. Lyra reached into a small pouch at her belt and pulled out a hand-carved data chip, smooth and warm from being carried close. She pressed it into Mara's palm. "What's this?" Mara asked. "A key," Lyra said. "If your ship ever fails, if your tools break, if you find yourself alone, this chip holds the core code of my limbs. It can talk to any machine that listens, and it carries a message just for you." Mara closed her fingers around it. "I'll keep it safe." "You already have," Lyra said. Below, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in gold and violet. Bells rang from the temple spires, not bells of war but of gathering. The first unity feast was about to begin, a celebration shared by elves, humans, and even freed ex-drones who had chosen new names and new lives. Mara shifted her weight. "I should go. My shuttle leaves at dawn." Lyra didn't ask her to stay. She simply stepped forward and embraced her, a gesture rare among elves, but one she had learned from watching humans say goodbye. "Thank you," Lyra whispered. "For seeing me when I was broken?" Mara hugged her back. "Thank you for letting me help." When they parted, Kale rose and walked to Mara's side. He lowered his head, offering his back. "You're coming with me?" Mara asked, surprised. Lyra smiled. "He's always been yours as much as mine. He chooses his own path now." Kale let out a soft chuff as if to say, "Of course I'm coming." Mara climbed onto his back, settling between his wings. She looked down at Lyra one last time. "Next time your limbs glitch," she said with a tired smile, "just ping me. I'll talk them down." Lyra placed a hand over her chest where the crystal still pulsed gently. "They won't glitch. But I'll call anyway." Kyle launched into the sky, powerful and graceful, carrying Mara toward the waiting shuttle. Lyra watched until they were just a speck against the stars. Back in her quarters, she opened the message chip from the council. It asked her to lead the new Alliance Guard, a force of elves and humans working together to keep the peace. She accepted, not with pride but with purpose. Days later, as she stood before the first joint training session, human recruits saluted her with crisp precision, while elven warriors bowed with quiet respect. She saw no division in their ranks, only shared resolve. That night, she stood again on the observation deck. The stars were brighter now, unclouded by smoke or fear. Somewhere out there, Mara was fixing a broken generator on a frontier colony. Somewhere else, Kale was teaching young dragons to fly without rage. And somewhere a former drone was planting seeds in fresh soil, learning what it meant to choose. The war had not ended with a bang. It had ended with 1,000 small acts of courage, trust, and repair. And in the heart of it all was a truth the galaxy had almost forgotten, that strength is not measured in age or origin, but in the willingness to reach out a hand, even to those you once thought beneath you. Lyra touched the data chip at her wrist, the one Mara had left behind. It hummed softly, not with code but with friendship. She looked up at the endless sky and whispered, "We are not done yet." And far away across the stars, Mara smiled as her ship's console pinged with a familiar signal, one that sounded like home,